Welcome back, everyone. I'm Lisa, and you're listening to Lomax's Allegedly, the podcast where we dig deep into the stories that the headlines barely scratch the surface of. Today's case is one that genuinely broke my heart when I came across it. We're talking about Frances Walker, a landlord, a community pillar, a good woman, murdered in cold blood by the very person she trusted enough to open her door to. This happened right here in Chicago, Illinois. And before this episode is over, you are going to understand exactly how something this horrific could happen and why we cannot stop talking about it. So let's get into it. Part 1. Who was Frances Walker? Frances Walker was, by every account, the kind of woman your neighborhood was lucky to have. She was a Chicago native, born and raised on the South Side, and she spent the better part of her adult life investing back into the community that raised her. She was a landlord, yes, but not the kind you hear horror stories about. Frances was the kind of landlord who checked on her tenants, who remembered birthdays, who would work with people when times got hard, because she knew what hard times looked like. People who knew Frances described her as generous to a fault. She had a warm presence, a big laugh. The kind of woman who made you feel like everything was going to be okay just by being in the same room as her. She was active in her church, she volunteered, she mentored young women in her neighborhood. Frances Walker was, in every sense of the phrase, a pillar of her community. And that is exactly what makes what happened to her so devastating. Because Frances didn't just lose her life. The community lost someone irreplaceable. Frances was not naive. She was not careless. She was a woman who extended grace to people because she genuinely believed in giving others a chance. That is not a character flaw. That is a virtue. And it should never have cost her her life. Part 2. The landlord, the tenant, the relationship. Frances Walker owned rental property in Chicago, property she had worked hard for, maintained with pride, and used as a way to provide stable housing in her community. At some point, she rented to a woman named Sandra, and at first, by all appearances, it seemed like a normal landlord-tenant situation. Sandra had a roof over her head. Frances had a tenant. But things between them began to shift. Tension developed between Frances and Sandra. Whether it was about rent, about the property, about something personal, there were signs that this relationship had become strained. And here is what I want you to think about as I walk you through this. How many times do we as women, especially women who are caregivers, nurturers, community builders, how many times do we dismiss the warning signs because we don't want to believe the worst about someone? Frances Walker was that woman. She believed in people. And Sandra took advantage of that. The details of their interactions in the weeks and months leading up to the crime paint a picture of a situation that had been escalating. There were disputes, there was conflict, and somewhere along the way, Sandra made a decision, a deliberate, calculated decision that would end Frances Walker's life and devastate everyone who loved her. Part 3, the crime. On the day Frances Walker was murdered, she was in her own property in Chicago, Illinois, a city she had called home her entire life, a city she had poured herself into, and she was killed by Sandra, her tenant, the woman she had given shelter to. I am not going to sensationalize the details of how Frances died, because Frances Walker deserves more than to be reduced to the violence that ended her life. What I will say is this: it was brutal, it was unnecessary, and it was a choice. Sandra made a choice to take the life of a woman who had done nothing but try to help her. When authorities responded to the scene, the investigation quickly pointed to Sandra as the perpetrator. She was located, arrested, and charged with the murder of Frances Walker. And I want you to sit with that for a moment. Frances opened her door to this woman. She gave her a home, and Sandra repaid that with the most unforgivable act imaginable. The Chicago community was shaken. People who knew Frances were devastated. Her church family mourned, her neighbors mourned, and her blood relatives were left to pick up the pieces of a life that was taken far too soon. Part 4. Justice and Aftermath. In the wake of Frances Walker's murder, the community did what communities do when they lose someone great. They rallied. They remembered her. They shared stories. They made sure that her name was spoken with the honor it deserved. Sandra faced the legal consequences of her actions, and while I believe in the justice system doing its job, I also know that no verdict, no sentence, no courtroom outcome will ever bring Frances back. It will never undo the harm. It will never fill the void that her absence has left in the lives of everyone who loved her. What justice can do, what cases like this can do, is remind us to pay attention, to take threats seriously, to check on the people in our lives who extend themselves for others, because those are often the people who are least likely to ask for help when they need it. Frances Walker was a giver, and the world needs givers, but givers need protection too. Part 5. Lisa's Reflection. Y'all, I don't take these stories lightly. Every single case I bring to this podcast is a real person, a real family, real grief that doesn't end when the episode does. And Frances Walker's story hit me particularly hard because she reminds me of women I know, women I love, women who give and give and give and sometimes don't get nearly enough back. I think about Frances, and I think about how unfair it is, how a woman who dedicated her life to her community, to her faith, to lifting other people up, how that woman ended up being victimized by someone she was trying to help. And it makes me angry. It makes me sad. And it makes me more determined than ever to keep telling these stories. Because Frances Walker deserves to be remembered, not just as a victim, but as the full, vibrant, generous, irreplaceable human being that she was, a landlord, a mentor, a church member, a neighbor, a friend, a woman who made Chicago better just by being in it. Rest in peace, Frances. We see you, we honor you, and we will not forget you. That's all for today's episode of Lomax's Allegedly. If this story moved you, please share it. Leave us a review. Please hit the like and subscribe button. Tell someone about Frances Walker, because the best thing we can do for people like her is make sure their stories are never forgotten. I'm Lisa, and this has been Lomax's Allegedly. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and always, always speak up.